So Mr. Mukul Sanwal is a very good writer. He's a ex-diplomat. He's an ex-IAS officer, I think. So he writes very nicely. His choice of words, his articulation, everything is top notch. So I highly recommend you, to whenever you see his name in the newspapers, it's highly recommended for you to follow that. Now, this article is about climate change. There are so many topics that have been discussed in this article. So before I start discussing what you are supposed to know or what is your basic understanding is supposed to be, does anyone have any question in relation to this article? Like you haven't understood something while you are reading this, some thought or some doubt came into your mind, something bothered you, you don't know what it is, anything like that, or the entire article felt like that? Per person emission. Okay, right. All of you understood this. I don't know who we are here, Sita. So, I mean, don't worry. We will look at some charts and we will try to understand the entire uh, theme. Right. Fine. The first and most important thing you need to understand in relation to climate change is everybody is having their own version of the story. The rich countries, the poor countries. So now, if you see this particular image, historical burden, this article will make more sense. Whenever a country is growing, or it is becoming urbanized, developed, from least developed to superpower or rich country, okay, you spend a lot of energy. Energy can be consumption. Energy consumption usually happens in industries, for construction, for domestic household, transport, right? You consume energy in many places. The more energy you consume, the more carbon emissions you release. Yes. So most of the time when we say energy, it's fossil fuels, that is coal and oil. So I have to burn more oil, I have to burn more coal to produce electricity. Only then industries will develop. So the more industrialization is happening in the country, more coal I will burn. So all the so-called developed countries like USA, China, if you see, they have spent or they have created, they have, you know, created gigatons or thousands of, uh, you know, carbon emissions have been released. Okay, billion metric tons. So this is the amount of carbon dioxide that is released by these so-called developing countries. Okay, this all happened from, let's say, 1850 onwards till 2010 or 2020. Even today also they are emitting, but they are already developed. They have spent huge amount of energy to reach where they are. China has released this much amount of billion metric tons of carbon dioxide. America has done this. Russia has done this. Germany has done this. They have developed. Okay. So far the story is very clear, right? That means they have done this exactly. They have burnt coal and oil to produce a lot of energy, and that energy has been used for development of their countries. Okay. Now they are coming in 2020 with all the conscience and saying developing countries and least developing countries like India or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, you should not release so much amount of carbon dioxide. You should not burn coal, or you should not use too much oil. You should become clean. You should move towards clean technologies. So this is the free gyan that these so-called developed countries are preaching to the least developing countries. That is the crux of this entire article. Okay, that means India is still developing. India has not reaped a demographic dividend. It is still has a lot of space. We are not totally urbanized. In South Korea, it's 90% urbanized. In USA, it's more than 60%. Urbanization has reached peaks. Okay, India is still here in urbanization. We have a huge gap to cover. For all those things, we need oil plus coal. Okay, now these countries are coming and saying, by 2035, I will reach net zero. That means the amount of carbon dioxide I'm releasing and the amount of carbon dioxide I'm capturing will both be same. Okay, so this is my target. China has declared this, USA has declared this. But if you notice, there are already $12 trillion economies. They have already urbanized. India cannot do that. So countries which already used and countries still have to use, both are being treated equally in this net zero argument, in this moral pressure that these developing countries are bringing to go for net zero, right? That means everybody is treated equally. Earlier to this, there was an argument that is common but differential responsibilities. What do I mean by that? Common. Everybody understands that climate is changing. Okay, we have to keep the temperatures up less than 2 degrees. 2 degrees. Okay, this is common for everyone. Everybody should work towards this goal. Okay, but differential responsibilities. That means you people have more burden, these countries have less burden. That is common but differential responsibilities. I hope you understand the difference between the present argument and the earlier argument. Earlier argument is saying, okay, you have already developed, you have used more coal, right? Now you also spend more money on renewable energy, right? Or you give more money to developing countries like India to move towards renewable energy. Give me so much money that I will move all my consumers from fossil fuels to electric vehicles. I will give them subsidy. They will purchase electric vehicles. Give me clean technology. Give me solar energy, like solar panels and all those things cheaply. I will give them to my farmers. They won't burn diesel, right? They will use solar energy. So you support me because you have already used. Okay, they are not willing to do this, right? They are not willing to do this, but they want everybody to be treated equally. Okay, this is the first story you need to understand. What the West is trying to do. They have already reaped the benefits. Now they want everybody to follow their suit. They want electric vehicles. India is very interested in moving towards electric vehicles, but India cannot do that alone without support. If okay, now one more story you need to understand. When we say 1.5 degrees or 2-degree temperature, okay, that is in proportion to this. In 1850s to 1900s, the temperature of the globe was 0 degrees. That is the base. Okay, that is not actually true, but that is the base. Okay, from that date, from 1850 to 1900, this baseline, how high the temperature is increasing? 1.5 degrees. Okay, 2 degrees. If we reach 2 degrees, it will be a total disaster. So we cannot go beyond 1.5 degree or 2 degrees. So we have to keep the temperature below this benchmark. That is what this particular chart is trying to tell you. I hope all of you are able to see this chart. So this is a danger level. Right now we are here. Probably 2020 means we are here. Okay. So in 2020, if we take drastic steps, the emissions might come down. Okay. If we don't invest in the clean energies right now at this particular point, we are going to face a lot of problem. That's the most important story that you need to understand. Yes. So this 1.5 degrees danger. So at our current consumption levels, we are going to breach it by 2040. After 2040, all those Hollywood movies will become true. Flash floods, ice melting. You can imagine all kind of natural disasters that are happening. So the future of the world is very, very, risky. Again, it's not my prediction. Okay, that's scientifically proved. And even now in 2020, you can see 2021. Sorry, we are in 2021, right? You can see in 2021 what happened. The Himalayan, flash floods, sea level rising. Yesterday, I have seen a BBC video where Antarvedi in Andhra Pradesh, the beach is coming closer to the land. Okay, so sea level is rising. Indonesia has changed its capital, right? So you can all understand how bad things will be in 2040 right now. Okay, so this particular article is discussing about this. So when we are going in this wrong path, what should we do? We should start investing in the clean technologies so that emissions will be reduced. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So this is again a K-shaped recovery, right? If we go in the current path, the orange line will happen. We are doomed. Beyond 21st century, 2060, 2070, most of us will become like unbearable. Agricultural productivity will come down. Sea level will rise. Polar ice caps are totally melted. New viruses probably will be released. Okay. Uh, cyclones will increase. Droughts will increase, heat waves will increase, thunderstorms will increase. I can tell all the human disasters or natural disasters I can think of, and everything will come true. So what should we do? We should go for substantial cuts in emissions. So what do I mean by that? Cuts in emissions. Cuts in emissions means we should reduce our coal usage. Where is the diagram? I didn't put them in an order. Okay. Right. So if you see this particular chart, as of now in India, for all the renewable energy momentum, we are doing, we are still generating 65% of our energy from coal. India is nowhere closer to move towards total renewable energies. I will tell you the problem. If you think about hydropower, they are either in Himalayan states or in northeastern states. Flash floods, earthquakes, so glacier melting, glacier outbursts. So there are a lot of problems for hydropowers. So hydropower is having environmental destruction protection, potential. That means on the one side, to protect environment by moving away from coal, we are destroying the forests. It doesn't make any sense, right? Next, renewables will take a lot of time to develop. Nuclear energy is very, very costly. It's also unsafe. Fukushima we have seen. So that is why countries are not so happy to invest in nuclear energy. That is where Bill Gates and others are trying to bring in small size reactors. So if it is successful, yeah, we will all be saved. Clear? So okay, I think this is the diagram you need to again understand. All the Western countries, China, USA, Russia. Yes, please.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
So my question is, we usually say that nuclear, these things are very
Unsafe.
dangerous. Yes, sir, unsafe. We have examples of Chernobyl blasts and all. And this might be basic, but I think so. What is about the Tarapur plants or Kakrapur plants or Narora plants?
See,
So
yeah.
what is the difference?
Okay, fine. I totally understand it.
Thank you, sir.
So even in Japan, we only cite Fukushima. There were many other reactors. So when we say nuclear reactors is unsafe, okay, it doesn't mean we don't want nuclear reactors. But once something wrong happens, okay, the outcome, like the fallout is high. So we have to be ready to bear the cost of the fallout. If you are okay with that, you can establish any number of nuclear plants, right? Second thing, so most of the nuclear reactors on the seaside for obvious reasons, but also at the same time, nobody expected tsunami to hit the Fukushima or human intervention to happen in Chernobyl. We never plan for the worst case scenario, right? We always hope for the best. But in reality, the thing is, to establish a nuclear reactor, it is very costly and the fallout is very costly. that means, I think anywhere between 80 to 90 billion dollars or $900 billion are spent on Fukushima aftermath. Okay, so that is why people are not interested to maintain a nuclear reactor. So that's simple, right? Tarapur and all these things were experiment. We took the Russian technology, we developed our own indigenous technology, and we tried to create a reactor. And their contribution to the overall energy needs of India is minuscule. I mean, it's not even like hardly 3%, right? In spite of all these things. So that is where things will, I mean, when I say nuclear reactors, it's not safe. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. We can go for nuclear reactors. Again, as I said, if Bill Gates is, Bill Gates and other people are reducing the cost of nuclear reactors, we can establish them very easily. But all over the world, everybody is moving away from nuclear reactors because of the cost of fallout. If something bad happens, we have to pay a lot of money, right? So lastly, before concluding that particular article, what Mr. Mukul Sanwal is saying is, India should not blindly follow China or USA because they have already developed. India has its own needs, 1.4 billion population, still a lot of population to be urbanized. If we fall into the trap of these, net zero emissions and all these things, we may not grow as much as we want to, right? So that's a very, very important thing to keep in mind. So I hope all of you understood what this article is trying to say now. And India is not against climate change, or India is a firm believer in climate change. India and all these developing countries are the first countries to believe in climate change. See this particular thing. We are facing heat waves, we have landslides, we have a lot of extreme heat waves, glacier melting. We know, we understand 110% what is the fallout of a increase in temperature. But India is having a lot of problems. We don't have enough money. We have problems, we don't have money. So what should developed countries do? Developed countries should give us the most latest technology so that we can move to electric vehicles, solar panels, okay, renewable energies. We are willing to move towards circular economy, right? We are even willing to reduce plastic. We are willing to construct metros. Delhi Metro is the first metro in the country which is totally carbon neutral. Okay, so earlier what used to happen, Delhi Metro is carbon neutral. That means to run the Delhi Metro, it doesn't emit any carbon, but the electricity that was generated came from coal. Okay, that is not so 100% clean, right? Later what they did is they opened a new solar power plant, Rewari, I think. They connected it to Delhi Metro. So the energy is coming from solar plant. The metro is 100% clean. So this is what we call as 100% clean energy. More and more cities will adopt metros. More and more carbon emissions will be saved. Yes. This is what is needed. For this, we need money. How many things we can do? We have to construct, a new parliament building. We have to construct we have to give a lot of money to the MPs, MLAs. Yes, corruption. Apart from this, we always have some or the other issues, law and order issues. So how many places can we invest money? We need money for other important places, right? Citizenship Amendment Bill. So we only can think about climate change in a limited fashion. Yes. So that is why we need money. So that is what Mr. Mukul Sanwal is saying. If you don't understand it, it's totally fine. We will work on it slowly. Yes. Yes. No, I don't even know the meaning of sarcasm, Bhaskar, right? Okay, right. Taliban outreach. again government. So you will learn more about what India is doing in some other class, but right now I wanted to convey what is the Western side point of view, what is Indian side point of view. Okay, Taliban outreach, as I have discussed this article, I think more or less verbatim we have discussed. Don't trust the Taliban. There is no such thing called as good Taliban, bad Taliban. Talibans are always bad. The more you discuss with them, there is no legitimacy with the discussion. Yes. Then Pakistan is totally happy having snakes in its own backyard. Let us wait and watch till how long they will be happy with that particular thing. And no country, especially the square, is happy to make Afghanistan a terror hub. China has its own region, Russia has its own region, Iran and India. None of these countries want Afghanistan to become a terror hub. They won't let Pakistan create a terror hub in the Afghanistan. And this last paragraph sums up our argument. We have discussed this. All the Afghanistan youth who grew up in the last 20 years, they grew up in a different mindset. They are not totally used to this old stone age ideology. They know what is TikTok, they know what is internet, right? Suddenly they cannot go back to no music, no life. So it becomes very difficult for normal Afghan citizen to adapt to the Taliban ways with interest. So there will be some revolution. That is what he is also talking about, more or less. Especially women, yes, definitely. And he rightly denounces this. Okay, almost all the foreign analysts or government perspectives is from men. They don't understand the problem of women, and they won't understand the problem of from girl child point of view. So we need more sensitive approach. If we keep women of Afghanistan as at the heart of policy making, we will make more sensitive policy making. That is what he is suggesting, and that is true. Sorry. Yes. Think about Afghanistan women and children. Automatically, your foreign policy will work towards human right protection. Yes. So it's very simple article, right? It shouldn't have taken you a lot of time to read it. Now here are two interesting articles, this one and this one. I think the only line you need to understand in this particular article is this. Sorry. What is non-performing asset? Have you heard the term? Okay, very good. So what is non-performing asset?
Sir, if a defaulter fails to pay the loan after 90 days, it will be declared a NPA, sir.
That's a very, I mean, that's one part of the definition. More or less, that is the macro idea. Right? So SBI has given a loan to Mr. V. Malaya. Okay, I don't know who he is, right? So just hypothetical character. No fans, I hope. Yes. So is it an asset or a liability for SBI?
It's an asset, sir.
Initially, it's an asset, sir.
Initially,
Yeah.
it's an asset.
Thinking that he will pay back the money, he is an asset.
This loan is an asset according to all of you for SBI. Okay, but this loan is a liability
for Mr. Malaya.
Mr. Malaya. Why? Because he has to pay something called as interest. So if the loan is 1,000 rupees, interest is 100 rupees. Okay, every month, let's say hypothetically 1 month per month. So every month he has to pay 100 rupees to SBI. So SBI gave 1,000 rupees. So for every month it is collecting 100 rupees. So you can think of this as a golden goose, and these are X. Okay. Now, in reality, what happens? This person will have a ticket to London. He runs away with the, he runs away, technically speaking. So now you are not even getting the goose and you are not even getting the X. So you will wait for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. That is when you declare this asset as non-performing asset. Why? This golden goose is supposed to lay some eggs like principal and interest, right? This is principal and this is interest. Now that interest nor principal is going to come back, you call this asset as non-performing asset. Outrightly, of course, technical definitions are very difficult to remember. Slowly, gradually, you realize this money is never going to come back. Non-performing assets. Now, why? Because if you take a loan and you invest in industry as you are supposed to be, okay, you might generate revenue. Let's say you are a hotel owner, you sell to the customers pay you back and you give back the interest to the loan. So as long as you are paying the loan, this 100 rupees per month, SBI is more than happy. But you took this loan and went for a Mauritius trip, then automatically we can never repay the money. So that is exactly what is happening in this particular country, that loans are being diverted for other non-productive purposes. This happens at all levels. Okay, so that's one thing to remember. Next. Okay. Sorry. Right. Non-performing assets. I try to simplify it. You will remember it for a long run, in case if you don't. Right. Now, this particular article is about judiciary and technology. Now, there are so many flaws in this particular article. I would like to rectify them. So I have utmost respect for Justice B.N. Srikrishna. He is the head of the data protection bill. He headed the data protection bill. He has a lot of insights. But I think all of us miss a simple point, that the scale at which technology is growing, okay, we have no clue how much technology can replace a lot of things. Okay, it may never replace a judge in this particular country. We may not allow that, but actually a lot of other things can be replaced. First of all, what is criminal justice system? Someone is arrested till he is produced in the court. The entire process is criminal justice system. I have to arrest someone, produce him in the court, provide evidence, give summons to the victims, give summons to the people who have seen the crime, right? So a lot of process is involved. Right now, we have never invested artificial intelligence or technology in this particular aspect. Please don't confuse artificial intelligence with automation. A judge has said something, okay, automatically it is printed and available in High Court, Supreme Court website. Okay, that is not artificial intelligence. It's pure automation. It's not even brain smart. Okay, machine learning is on a whole new level. What is machine learning? Machine learning is, let's say, you have fed certain amount of data, right? There are 3 pending cases in 3 different states. All the records are online. This artificial intelligence will observe that X has a history that he is having case number 1, 2, 3 in 3 different states, right? He has violated a case which has been in front of Supreme Court for 30 times. It will analyze a lot of data which we don't even know that existed, and then it will show to the judge, okay, he is a criminal, he's a career criminal, right? That is what artificial intelligence will do. We are not even talking in this level, right? We are only talking about digitizing the court records. We are only talking about apps which will take the photo of the criminal, sending summons to the criminals through WhatsApp. These are all normal things. This is normal technology. Artificial intelligence is totally different. Machine learning will analyze things which you never thought existed. It will not only tell that, X is having 3 criminal cases, it will also tell X and Y are friends. Almost in every crime, X and Y are friends. So when you are booking this fellow, also book this fellow. Right? That is how artificial intelligence work, machine learning. The problem is till now we haven't invested in this kind of technology. That is why we are not reaping the benefits of digital technology. Just for example, I will tell you how India works. I tell Srinivas. Both names are same, right? There is no standardization. But I can write Srinivas like this. I can write Srinivas like this. Okay. So there is some Pullamma. Okay. Y Pullamma, K Pullamma. In one document she is Y Pullamma. In another document she is K Pullamma. Okay. There is no standardization. These kind of human errors will not make good data sets. Right? So that is why it will probably take 5 or 10 years for India to get a standard AI-based judicial support system. But think about it, when we realize that these kind of problems are existing in Indian judiciary, that is when we start standardizing or link every name with Aadhaar. Right? Only when we do this, okay, both these Srinivasas are having the same Aadhaar, means this is the same person. So he have 10 cases, he have 5 cases. We haven't done any of these things. We are just updating all the old records into digital records. Then they have to have OCR, optical character recognition. Then it has to be analyzed. Then names have to be analyzed. It's a journey. It's a journey of 5 to 10 years. That is when, I think a lot of lawyers will lose their jobs, and a lot of, Supreme Court lawyers and all these people will have data on the fingertips. All I have to do is type a name and everything will be provided. Once we work in such kind of level, cases will come down drastically. Right? Let's say there are 2 land disputes. Okay, all the land records in India are digitized. All the judge have to do is type few numbers. Okay, he will know this land belongs to Mr. A, this land belongs to Mr. B, and these are registered in blockchain. 100% foolproof. So if C is coming and saying this land belongs to me, the judge will just type the number and say, okay, A, fine, this land belongs to A, this is a false case. On the spot, the case is dismissed. 40 to 50% of Indian cases are for land issues. Okay, blockchain technology will solve all these issues. So when Mr. Sri Krishna, Justice B.N. Sri Krishna is talking about, we won't replace the judges, I'm not so sure about it, because in Europe, they have already tested their pilot project. They have given artificial intelligence certain cases, okay, and they asked the AI to, provide a judgment. And in 79% of the cases, it has rightly given the same judgment that a human judge has given. This is 2021. Okay, in 2041, AI will be 10 times more smart. Quantum computing will be there, AI will be there, the processing power will be much higher. Yes, natural neural processing will come. I'm not so sure that we will see the same world that we want to see. It will totally change. So this is the power of AI, right? Are we clear? Unemployment. Okay, we will discuss about AI some other time. But generally speaking, just remember Supreme Court of India, our own Supreme Court of India has already started 2 projects. One is SUPES, the other one is SUVAS. Both of them are related to AI. Right? Supreme Court portal for assistance in court efficiency, and then is translation of judgments. Both are AI based judgments.
Sir, a question from my side.
Yes.
So, would AI be able to consider principles of natural justice?
It's a very good question. So, first of all, it depends on how we are feeding the data set to the AI, right? That means if I am the programmer, if I am the person who is designing that particular course, there will be core tenets, like I will feed Constitution of India, the principles of natural justice, yes, which National Green Tribunal actually works on, then all the acts and laws. Then it will go for a pilot project, let's say 3 to 4 years. It will go through every judgment that is given in the last 10 years. Then it will come to a natural understanding. Right? So I hope it will take all these things into consideration. Again, please remember, in India, our target is not to replace judges. Right? It is to reduce the burden on the justice. That is exactly what the name says. Assistance for court efficiency. That means AI will give 90%, will do 90% of the job. The rest of the 10%, which is human discretion, will be taken by the judge. So the burden on the judges is coming down. He might take quicker decision based on empirical data, and still best of the both worlds will be there. AI is helping, human discretion is there. So we don't have to worry about justice. Clear? So that should solve some doubts. Again, see, technology is always a step ahead of the law. Technology is always one step ahead. Why? Technology is changing so rapidly that law is not able to catch up. So, and yeah, my one more intention is this. When we are talking about judiciary, judiciary cannot survive alone. Judiciary needs support from police officers, land records, forensic. 10,000 other people have to be also digitized to help judiciary. So when we say e-courts, when we say e-courts, okay, that means all these people also have to go for digitization. Only when these three things are there, that is when judiciary can perform efficiently. Yes, AI cannot be replaced with humanism of what is human character of uniqueness. Okay, so I will tell you a simple story. Just because Bhaskar has brought it out, 45% of the youth in Japan are unmarried and they are having AI chatbots as girlfriends or boyfriends. Okay, and during the COVID pandemic times, there is an app, AI-based app, AI chatbot in China. Okay, many people are staying inside their own homes and they are making friends with these kind of apps instead of real people. Okay, I'm not making all this stuff. Please go through Google, search it. Okay, these are all real stories. People are not going out of their homes. People are making girlfriends and boyfriends in chatbots, robots. One person has married a robot. Okay, and if you haven't seen the movie Wall-E, right, go watch it. It's an animation movie. How human race will become so lazy because of all the comforts of technology, right? So that is just for example, and I 100% agree with Bhaskar that a robot or a algorithm can never be a human being. It can never have a heart or a feelings. But the thing is, we will lose our feelings and heart. We will become machinized. Okay, a day will come when you blink your eyes and your TV will change the channels. You don't have to lift your hand. So that is where we are headed. So technology has a lot of dangers. People are marrying robots. Okay. Yeah. So now it is time for our industry 4.0. Now, what is industry 4.0? Why it is important for us? We have to understand. I hope you can see this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we started here, the hunter-gatherer society. We are presently in this information-based society. That is where Barack Obama said, right? Data is the wealth of 21st century. Data is the oil of 21st century. That means information is wealth. Okay. So we are right now in fourth industrial revolution. Already there is also a fifth industrial revolution, but we will discuss mostly about fourth industrial revolution. So what is fourth industrial revolution? Fourth industrial revolution is mostly about automation, big data, cloud computing. Cloud computing and a lot of automation. See, automation means where human beings are replaced with machines with ability to think on their own, more or less. It's kind of machine learning plus automation. Earlier, what did I say? If you invent a robot which flips burgers, okay, like right side, left side, that is just automation. We have seen many gurudwaras, many temples now adapting auto roti missions, right? They will make roti for the pilgrims. Even Tirupati Laddu has been automated, right? Missions create Tirupati Laddu. So all these things are just bare mechanization. That means a human used to do this. Now a mission is doing this. So mechanization is not exactly automation. Automation is the company which will hire this artificial intelligence, big data, sensors. It will know when to increase production, when to reduce production, where to save money, how to save money. I will tell a simple example. Let's imagine you are an industrialist. What is your ultimate objective? Every rupee saved for you is a profit, right? So in Industrial Revolution 4.0, what will happen is it will have something called as digital twin. What does that mean? Let's say a mission A is there. This is a real mission. Okay, this is a real mission which will produce something. Same to same mission will be created in a computer. Okay, pardon my drawing skills. So same to same mission will be created in a virtual reality. This is a real thing. This is a computer thing. Now, when this mission is working, a mission is working, virtual reality mission will also work in the same thing. That means computer will tell this mission is only 60% efficient. If you adjust a small bolt here, or if you reduce the temperature here, or if you use a different wire here, okay, the efficiency will go to 85%. How did this virtual reality came to this conclusion? That is where big data will come into the picture. Okay, this mission is fully fitted with sensors. Everywhere it is having sensors. So every stroke it makes, every percentage, 1% of or 1 joule of electricity it uses, okay, or 1 degree of temperature it is having, everything will be noted. This big data will be analyzed in cloud computing, and it will tell the mission is performing only 80% efficiently. We can improve the performance to 85%. Then automatically mission A.1 will be created. So the company is saving a lot of money through this efficiency improvement. Okay, that is Industry 4.0. That's a whole new level. Okay, we are not only replacing human beings. Earlier 4 people used to do the work of A, right? Now the mission is continuously optimizing so that 6 people's work is done by mission A1. How did it come to that conclusion? Data, sensors, analysis, computing power, cloud computing power. Okay, it is not only taking the data from mission A, it is taking data from all the A missions in the entire country probably. Okay, and they are coming to this particular conclusion. Yes, next, it will also tell every 3 months the mission A1 should be repaired or maintained, or a particular part has to be changed. It will also save a lot of cost. Yes, this is just tip of the iceberg. You can imagine the rest of the story. So this is one way to see digital Industry 4.0, digital twins. This is how companies will make a lot of profit. Then Internet of Things. That means the 5G technology which will be there in the country, every mission will be totally observed 24/7. Company owner will exactly know how much profit he is going to make, how much money is going to save. Everything will be efficiently optimized. Yes, this is just for industry. Then you can go for logistics. I have produced something from A1. Okay, now I have to send to point B. Right? How efficiently can I do that? I can automate everything from cranes to the transportation. Yes, tomorrow you might go to a Amazon warehouse where all the goods are automatically collected by the robot in a most efficient fashion, and it will be delivered to point B. Yes, you get the picture, right? What is the power of all these things coming together? Now, in this particular article, what he's trying to tell you is this: we can bring all that to our micro, small, and medium enterprises, which is 95% of the industries in the country. Just imagine the efficiency Indian industries will have. The more of industry 4.0 will come to MSMEs, the more efficient the companies will become, the more industrialization, the more exports. Indian economy will become a $5 trillion economy. Right? Now, what are the problems? Everything sounds so sweet, but to invest in a automated mission, it will cost a lot of money. Capital is one of the biggest problems of micro, small, and medium enterprises. They don't have enough money, right? Then you need a lot of maintenance, software engineers. So every company has its own unique requirements. Somebody has to come there and they have to discuss, adapt, and modify it to you. So if you are a 1 crore company or 1.5 crore company, you cannot afford all these things, right? So probably government should create these startup hubs, hackathons, where young startups which are willing to work with big, upcoming MSMEs will be linked. So Startup India can be linked with Make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat. When Startup India and Atmanirbhar Bharat come together, India will become an industrial hub. It will create employment both in service sector, industry sector. It will improve our efficiency. Yes. Again, we don't need Skill India, right? Because all the jobs will be taken by automation. But again, that's not up for the discussion. Okay. So probably we will create more jobs also. Skill India will also happen definitely. So Startup India, Skill India, Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, everything will come together and India will become a $5 trillion economy. So that is one way to look at this entire article. So just understand 4.0 is not missions coming in place of humans. 4.0 is next level. It's optimizing everything. Everything will be done in a more or less automated fashion. Very few humans will be there. 10, 15 people just to observe everything is going fine or not. They will be paid very highly, but more or less majority of others can be replaced, right? Turnout times in our ports can be reduced. Unloading and loading of goods can be reduced. Everything will be perfectly optimized. That means lorry or the truck will come exactly in the particular time. 15 minutes it will take to load that particular truck. It will send the same truck to the container, from there to the ship. Every point you are observing it, you are optimizing it, you are saving a lot of money. The more you optimize, the more money you make. So that is what is a capitalist is looking for, right? If I'm a business owner, what do I need? I need to maximize the profit. And you can also track the data. For example, during this COVID period, we have seen Remdesivir and all these things were heavily black marketed. But in industry 4.0, what will happen is every batch, every lot, and every vial will have RFID tag. It will be observed, monitored. End-to-end usage will be noted. You can say QR codes are right there now, or barcodes are there. But the thing is, from production all the way till the last man in the line, the chain is not observed through blockchain. I can always manipulate the data. Okay. And please remember, when all these things are happening side by side parallelly, when Industrial Revolution 4.0 is happening, okay, we are creating a super smart society, right? A super smart society is also being created side by side. So industry will create better society, better societies will create better industries. It's a virtuous cycle. But unfortunately, what will happen is inequality will also increase very rapidly. Many people will lose their jobs, right? May not be on the scales people are fearing, but AI and machine learning will definitely create a huge unemployment crisis. Already people are not skilled enough to understand what is happening in the market. According to various surveys, around 60 to 70% of engineering graduates that are coming out of engineering colleges are unemployable. They are totally useless for the market. Okay, again, none of these are my words. Surveys actually prove that engineering students coming out of engineering colleges are not employable. Only 30% of them are somehow useful. The two to fill various cadres. Right? If you are talking about cutting edge technologies, AI, cyber security, blockchain, and all those things, I don't know how many engineers are actually capable of all those things. And normally, Indian society does not even consider people who did BCom, BSc, or BA. They are anyhow useless according to Indian society, right? So within engineers, we have classes. So all these people are going to face some kind of economic crisis. With automation, labor force will also face a lot of job losses, right? So smart society may not be for everyone. Yuval Noah Harari calls this as, useless class. Karl Marx created rich and poor, the bourgeois and the others, right? In the same way, this automation and all these things will create something called as useless class. That means 70% of the world population does not know what to do. They don't have any job. They are not skilled, trained. They are not updated to the latest things. And the rest of the things can be done by either machines or the rest of the population. 2% of American population is feeding the rest 98. Thanks to missions. I think with automation in industry 4.0 and all those things, this will even come further low, right? You get the picture? So just think about all these things.